What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Locked On Cavs podcast. I'm Chris Manning. That's him and Dammarell. If you're watching on YouTube, then you know that we have a special guest today. It is Serena Winters from Bally Sports. We're going to talk all kinds of Cavs stuff today. It's going to be a ton of fun. Happy to have Serena with us. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Serena, first off, how are you? How are you doing? You are on the road with the team. Cavs are back in action on Thursday. How's it going? How was the trip up? Thank you so much again for joining us. How was the trip up? How does it feel to be back after the All-Star break? Did you get time off? Do you feel like you got any time off? Did you feel like this is like real too quick? Like, how are you doing? Are you ready to be back?
Time off, man. What do you mean? We had the All-Star weekend in Cleveland, and I live in Cleveland, so I don't know what time off you were talking about, except maybe a little bit yesterday was kind of I don't even know what day of the week it is. I literally have to look up my phone. Today's Wednesday, so Tuesday I got some time to get the to-do list things done. But look, it was so fun to have All-Star weekend in Cleveland. I was hosting events every day and then going to the games at night and seeing the guys perform so well. It was fun, man. The city was just electric. I wish we had some better weather for it. But other than that, it was a good time.
Evan, my co-host, buddy, how are you? And what's going on?
I'm good. I'm feeling a little bit more refreshed after a pretty busy weekend. Like we all know that All-Star weekend was. I think today's the first day I truly feel like I'm out of the fog for once. Monday and Tuesday were a bit of a struggle for me, especially Monday, the day after All-Star. I just had no desire to do anything. And then today I woke up with some actual sustainable energy, and it didn't feel like I had that false high after waking up where I just crashed 30, 40 minutes after. And I'm good. How are you, Chris? Let's do a roundtable. Let's talk about our feelings. How are you?
I'm excited to watch basketball. I'm excited to get into the end of the season. I'm excited for all that's going to come. So many fun things to think about. I know some Cavs fans on Twitter are annoyed about playing the Sixers a bunch. I just want to see them defend James Harden and Joel Embiid as much as possible because that to me is fun. I just want to see it. It's going to be weird. But Serena, let's the important part of this, to steer this ship back the other way. What has it been like for you to come in, start covering this team mid-season, and have to what was your approach to just getting all of the basics of the Cavs on your right away? Because you're spending time covering Philly, you were hosting Locked On Sixers, you were there before. You come here, you have to hop in midstream. What is that like as someone trying to analytically cover this team, to think about this team in a thoughtful way, and doing it on television where I would fuck up every 3 seconds if that was what I was doing?
It is definitely different. I mean, I've been covering the league for over a decade now, but I can tell you that this was a first for me, coming into a team absolutely mid-season and just being thrown into the fire. The good news is I had already been watching the Cavs on NBA League Pass because they were kind of my fun team to watch, right? So I already had some background. But for me, when you do get thrown into the fire, really quickly with a new team, I think it's really important, number one, to figure out what it is that the fans are most interested in. And how I actually do that is I listen to every single Cavs podcast, right, that I could possibly find, including Locked On Cavs, because to me, what you guys are talking about, what the fans are responding to, that helps me, figure out, okay, what can I do to bring these topics even more to light with the fans? So that's kind of a crash course for me. As soon as I knew that I was going to be coming here, it was how many hours of Cavs podcast can I listen to so I can get to know this fan base? And then from there, I'm already a stats nerd. So when I was doing the Locked On Sixers podcast, like you mentioned, I was already looking at, whether it's NBA stats or cleaning the glass stats every day and comparing teams. So I kind of already knew where the Cavs stood coming in, but really it's just reading everything you can, listening to everything you can, and trying to get a feel for what matters to the fans. Because at the end of the day, my job, at least I feel like my job, is to be the conduit between the team and the fans and help provide, good storylines and things that actually interest people. And how do I do that? By just researching what, the fans are interested in. So thank you guys over at Locked On Cavs for providing a daily podcast so I could make sure to get my PrizePicks in every day.
We're happy to help with that in any way, shape, or form. But you and I have talked a little bit when you first came here. It was a bit of a surprise when the announcement came because I think Bally Sports and the Cavs announced it. Then almost immediately after, the folks at Locked On announced it, saying like, well, Serena's leaving, guys. Say your goodbyes. And then I'm like, oh, no, wait, this is actually a welcome opportunity for Chris and I. So for those listening, this has kind of been in the works for a little while now, and we're really happy to have you here. But now that you've kind of been doing this for a little bit, you're traveling with the team, you're providing this great coverage, you're looking at new angles and ways to attack stories to help generate fan interest and figure out what the fans want to hear about. How has that gone for you? Like, do you have any favorite stories or moments that you've kind of just unearthed from your own sleuthing and research?
Well, I think that getting to know the players, off the basketball court a little bit and getting to know their personalities for me has been the most fun. Like, look, I'm the newbie, right? I'm the new kid coming into a new school. And so I remember within the first couple of weeks, it might have been even my first traveling trip, coming onto the team plane. And, I'm just trying to be professional, kind of head down, go to my seat, want to make sure that, I'm not in anybody's way type of thing. And Darius happened to be just in the aisleway, and he makes a joke. He puts like a fake microphone in my face, and it's like, why do you need to get back to your seat? And he like kind of turns the tables and asks me a question, lightens the mood a little bit, right? And I had heard so much about how Darius is one of those guys on the team where players just gravitate towards him. JB calls him kind of that Mike Conley type. And I think for me, that was an example of him off the court, because he's much different when I'm asking him questions or when he's talking with the media than when he doesn't have the camera in his face. So that was just a small snippet into who this guy is. Like, here's the new kid, me coming in, and he makes an effort to make a joke in front of everybody, which I appreciated. Things like that. The guys they've been really great. You've got Kevin, who's just a vet and fun to be around right now. You can tell how happy he is. You can see how close him and Jetty are. It's also fun for me now covering Rondo in this light because I've been covering him for his entire career on the other side, right? Like, I've never been on a team where I was actually covering Rajon from this side of things. So now getting to have that small talk with him and see how he is, or things like, making sure if I'm behind him, he's got to let me go first, things like that, little things that you don't get to know about these guys until you're kind of traveling with them. Or, I can keep going down the roster. I remember the first week I was here introducing myself to Brandon Goodwin. And I said something to him like, hey, I don't really know anybody around here. I'm the new kid coming in, and I just wanted to introduce myself. Have you seen my face before I start bombarding you with questions? Nice to meet you. And he kind of laughs, and he just goes, I don't really know anybody here either. Like, I'm new too, right? Because you don't think about that. But Brandon Goodwin was also new at the same time I was coming in, right? When he was actually playing for the Cavs. You've got Lamar, who's just super kind all the time, always says hi. Ed Davis, who I've known since his Laker days and his Blazers days. So look, it's all an NBA family. It's fun to connect with everybody, and I'll just say that everybody on this team has been so great so far. It's not easy coming in midseason and having to be welcomed in like that. So I just appreciate the support that the players have showed, definitely.
We'll be right back with Serena Winters, but first, going to tell you about our friends at BetOnline. Football might be over for the season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, and more, plus maybe where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline is the number one spot for your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just the best for basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to your favorite other sports that might be out there, plus Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about trends and action. That is BetOnline, and that is where the game starts. All right, we're back with Serena Winters. Serena, when you look ahead for this Cavs team and you look ahead to what is coming, you look ahead to this final sprint of the season, what are you looking at? What are you most interested in following as we kind of figure out what is actually going to turn out the rest of this Cavs season?
I think from more of a macro perspective, and something that I've noticed in all of my time covering the NBA, is expectations are a really tricky thing. And this Cavs team got to where they are at without lofty, high expectations. And they kind of use that, it feels like, motivation, right? Like that underdog mentality. They've always had that. And now they're at a place where, for better or for worse, right? This is how it is. They're outperforming what the expectations were. Now they're being talked about. Now they're in the national media. Now you've got All-Star in Cleveland, and they're talked about even more. And so now it has switched from not having the expectations to having the expectations. And how a team responds to that and reacts to that, I think, really plays into how far a team can go and really says something about the team. And so for me, I am most interested to see how they perform now that they have the target on their back. They have the expectations. Like, they've talked a lot about how they wanted the respect, right? How they came into this season feeling like they didn't necessarily have the respect of the league. Well, now they have the respect of the league, but now you have to make sure that when you're playing the teams like Detroit, or the teams that you are supposed to beat, right? That you are not only beating these teams, but you are beating these teams with confidence. Because something that, if you look at the teams like the Golden State Warriors, what they have is they beat the teams they are supposed to beat. And so that's where a younger team has to learn how to grow beyond that. So for me, it'll be really interesting just to see how they now respond to those expectations and see if they can still have, it's like, how do you have an underdog mentality when you're no longer the underdog, right? Because they're not the underdog anymore. So I think that's what I'm most interested to see in this second half, because the Eastern Conference, I mean, let's face it, it's so tight.
I mean, yeah, it's super tight, and we can talk about some of the moves. Like, Chris and I have talked about it quite a bit. We've had guests on who've talked about it with us a bit, but I want to touch on the underdog mentality aspect. Darius has mentioned it a few times where it was actually the last time they were in Detroit, and he was clearly frustrated. JB was clearly frustrated. A lot of the players were clearly frustrated after that loss. And Darius kind of made it clear, saying, like, I hope this lit a fire under everyone's butts because we haven't won anything yet. So do you think, just as someone who's so closely associated with this team, that you're not too concerned about that underdog them losing that underdog mentality? Because it feels like when you have that guy who is the fun loving guy who can kind of gravitate everyone towards him, but is also the leader, is kind of just telling you from the top down, like, hey, we haven't done anything yet. Like, that's really refreshing to hear, because you don't hear a lot of young guys who act like that. Like, they win 20-something games, or they're in the hot seat just to maybe be a top team in the Eastern Conference, and they're flying high and just they don't know how to handle adversity. Like, I found that super refreshing when he was talking like that.
I hear you, Evan. I find it refreshing too. And look, accountability is really hard to come by in the NBA. That's something that I've taken away from my years in, is that accountability is really important. It's a word that's talked about a lot, but it is hard to come by. And I think that Darius taking that accountability is huge. However, and this kind of goes back to actually something Coach Bickerstaff said at practice today. It's not necessarily about what you say, right? It's about what your actions are. So although, yes, saying all the right things in that department, it's okay, let's see now how this team comes out against Detroit, now that they have a chance to really, I guess, prove themselves against the words that they said last week or the week before, whatever it is. So I hear you. I mean, that's what you want to hear. The last thing that you would want would be, your leader not to come out and say they were disappointed after that game. So yes, they're saying all the right things, but I think that's what Coach Bickerstaff was cautioning against at practice today is, he wishes that all of the spotlight and all the attention was his team. I think we all remember what he said. What was it, a couple games after the Bucks game when JB said, look, we were all looking at our press clippings, right? When we just need to get the job done. And so it's just actions, right? So that's why I'm so interested to see what happens over these next couple of weeks.
Well, and I think going hand in hand with it is I think teams know, or at least to some degree, know what they're getting when they play the Caps now, right? Like they understand that Jared Allen is playing at this high level. They know when Darius Garland has been healthy, he's playing at this incredible All-Star level. They know that Evan Mobley is like the favorite rookie. They know how good this team I think is now. Like I feel like they're to some degree they probably are getting different shots now. They probably are getting different levels of competition right now. Like going to the Sixers game that we saw right before the break. I feel like that game was like this. Embiid was like there's a lot going on in Philly. Like there's a whole other stuff he's worried about, but it's like he went at them and was like making a point to just kind of like I've never seen Jared Allen attack like that and beat like that this year. It was incredible for Embiid to do that. And it's like I think the Cavs when they played Indiana of late, when they're getting Indiana again in a couple weeks, when they're going to play the Pistons, like they're going to get teams' best shots now. And I think that will be an adjustment for them. I think they were catching guys off guard with effort, with kind of how good and unique the defense is from a scheme perspective, from a personnel perspective. And now this last stretch of the season, like the schedule theoretically is easier. Like the winning percentage, we tell you it's easier. There's one really tough stretch at the end of March, but theoretically it's easier. I think they're going to have to learn how to go through this. Like this will be something where I think if we can look in the crystal ball, like 2-3 years from now, and let's say things keep progressing the way they are, it wouldn't shock me if Garland or Mobley in a moment of introspection is like, I learned how to win and how to navigate an 82-game season during this stretch. When we got really high, we got knocked down a peg, and then we learn how to adapt. It wouldn't shock me if that's kind of where this is headed to some degree.
Me either. I think you make great points there. And I think that with that in mind and going back to everything that I mentioned about expectations, like this is to be expected. Like the NBA season, it is a roller coaster, right? You're not going to win all 82 games and you are going to have losses. You are going to have lapses. So how do you respond to those? And kind of to Evan's point earlier, how Darius responded with what he said, right? Like that's accountability. You want that. If Jared Allen has had an off night, you know what he says in the post-game presser? That he could have done better. That's accountability. You want that. Going back to this concept of these guys genuinely do not want to disappoint each other. So when they have bad nights, you can feel it. That is a great learning experience from this group. I have been around a lot of teams that do not have that feeling of not wanting to let everybody down. So look, are they going to lose some bad games from here on out? Of course they are. That's just what happens in the NBA. You don't want to overreact to that. But we've also seen with Coach Bickerstaff, when he's been, disappointed after certain losses, there's a reason, because he wants to make sure that all of these guys have that same underdog mentality we talked about of not letting up, right? So if you're up, 15 on Detroit, then make sure that you don't take your foot off the gas, because every single team in the NBA is good enough to beat you on any given night. So what the mature teams learn, that the younger teams still have to learn, is that you can't let up, right? And you hope that that's a lesson they learned pre-All-Star break. Some of those losses is that they might have taken their foot off the gas a little too early. And what will help them a ton moving in towards the end of the season is you keep your foot on the gas for the whole game, because that's what the great teams do. And those are the lessons that you have to learn. And look, they've got a great coach for this group, and these guys are awesome. So I have no doubt they will learn that. But yeah, we'll just have to see how this later third of the season goes, because like you said, teams are playing the Cavs differently now, right? Like that Philly Cavs game, that had a whole different vibe to it. And that's something that these young guys have to learn as well, that you still have to go into it with that same all-out effort that you did at the beginning of the season, but also know that these teams aren't going to be surprised by you now. They're ready for you. And so they're coming right back at you with it. Like before, you weren't getting the team's A+ night, right? But they got Joel's A+ night when they played him. And I think we saw it too when Jarrett was defending Joel in the All-Star game, right?
Yes.
I think you
Mhm.
saw like, right? Like you saw, oh, that affected Jarrett. Like that affected this Cavs team, right? There was a reason why JA played like he did in that All-Star game against Joel. And those are all good things. Like that means you got it. That means you got that heart. So yeah, it'll be fun. And I mean, I know that you said Cavs fans are kind of bummed that they're playing Philly this many times, but to me, like, isn't this what you want? Like, this is going to be Philly. You're going to see James Harden. You're going to see Joel. I know it's tough because it's in your conference, but as an NBA fan, like, aren't those the games that you want? You want to play the best teams.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think let's talk about that a bit more, but let's take a quick break.
This episode is also brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait for the person behind the counter to just order the only parts available on their computer from the warehouse that they work with is carrying? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home in your pocket, and you can use it to save money and time, frankly. Why choose to spend 30%, 50%, or even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business, and Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you can need: brake parts, tail lamps, and motor oil, plus new carpet. So go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know that we sent you. Remember, that is Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know that the good folks at Locked On sent you.
All right, and we are back. Just to pick up on what you're talking about, though, Serena, there is something exciting about that. I think because Chris and I have talked about this a few times, and we're looking a little bit ahead when we're saying, okay, ideally, who would you want Cleveland to play in the first round of the playoffs? Because there's a good chance they host a first round series at minimum. Possibly they host us all the way into the second round as well, just based on how things go. But when you look at how what Brooklyn add by adding Ben Simmons, and I think the news of the vaccine mandate today with Kyrie Irving kind of being back in the fold at Barclays really does change things for the Nets a little bit. They're pretty far back in Cleveland right now, but I feel like they're in the thick of things. I think Atlanta has the ability to turn the corner still. I think Milwaukee being neck and neck with Cleveland and being the defending champs is exciting. I think Philadelphia having James Harden in the fold is exciting just for them as the fan base and also for the league. But also it's exciting as someone who has to watch and cover the Cavs on a night-to-night basis because I get to watch the Cavs play them 3 more times. And I think that adds a new wrinkle and a new dimension. And I think, like you said, it's accountability and it's youth and experience and maybe some growing pains as well. I think the Cavs might hit some more growing pains, but these are great opportunities for them to learn. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think this is a great opportunity for the Cavs to continue to learn and grow in real time to maybe take that next step that they've already kind of surpassed a lot of expectations this season. But let's keep the ball rolling. Let's keep this positive momentum moving. I think this is a great opportunity because, like, Cavs fans, like you said, might be fretting over this a little bit, but in reality, this is exciting because it's only going to be beneficial long term.
Oh, 100%. Like I said, this is what you want. You need them to face these types of tasks. You need them to have playoff type environments. Going back to that playoff type environment, like some of these guys, like think about Evan Mobley. He's never been in an atmosphere that was at Wells Fargo Center when they played Philly, right? That playoffs, style type of atmosphere. Like these are all new things. What about that Golden State game when Klay Thompson's return? Like, can you imagine the energy for those guys there? And when it's playoff time and you have that and you're the Warriors and you know exactly what that environment is like, you immediately have a leg up over a Cavs team who is feeling this all for the first time, right? So that, to your point, Evan, is to feel those moments, to give you that experience, now makes it so for the next time that you are there, now you're ready for that moment. But you can never be ready for the moment if you didn't have the experience to begin with. So that goes to show, like, yes, playing these teams and having these types of games, this is only going to help this Cavs team in their development, in their evolution. I mean, they're so young. So you're going to have the teams that have the experience, the Bucks who have won a championship, the Nets who have, my gosh, so much talent on that team. There's no way that they're going to stay in the 8th seed as they are right now. Like, the Nets are currently 7 games back. Like, they're not going to be 8 come playoff time, right? Boston, who has a lot of experience within playoff type environments. This Cavs team doesn't have that experience yet, and that's okay. They're gaining that experience now. That's what these moments are for. So, I mean, I'm in complete agreement with you there, Evan.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think kind of hand in hand that it's like Mobley has not played 82 games before. He played a college season, and yes, you play a ton in AAU, you play a ton in high school, but like the 82 game season is its own personal hell marathon, whatever you want to describe it as. Like, it is really brutal. Like, it takes a lot to get through it. Like I was listening to something Channing Frye said, like, over All-Star break, and he was like, the first 25% guys are getting into shape. The second 25%, it's like weird because there's the trade deadline and like teams are in weird flux. Then you're getting into like the post part of it. And then you're like, everyone's beat up by the end of it, but you're in better shape and you're just trying to like, who's the last man standing? Like, injuries happen, you get beat up. Like, I think it takes time to like get adjusted to that. Like, it just does. If you're Evan Mobley, who's 19 years old, you played in college, you played AU, that's its own thing, but like, this is its own special kind of grind. Like, there's nothing that can really prepare you for this thing until you go through this gauntlet, until you then get into the playoffs, and then you have to be in a city for a couple of days and do those adjustments. Like, this will be an adjustment for all these guys, and I think that's good. Like, this is the kind of thing that if they struggle now, I think it's one of those things where you can say, okay, maybe this makes them better next year. Like, they can look at this and say, we knew how to navigate this now. We know how to navigate this now. I think that's what makes like Kevin such a useful piece of this team, because he's been through this at the highest level. He's been like up to the brink of it all in every version of the second LeBron era and here in Cleveland. He went through every version of that you could go through. He had his own injuries. He had the run to the finals. He had underdog situations. Like, he had coaching changes. Like, he's been through it all, and it seems like he's been willing to provide that to this group in a way that is needed. And like, they've navigated Rubio being hurt. They've navigated Sexton being hurt. Like, they've gone through stuff that I think I don't it's like hard to talk about a lot to me, because it's like, I can't just keep saying Ricky Rubio's hurt this season, Colin Sexton missed time. Like, that's a big what if. That you just kind of keep moving on, but that reveals something. I think. Like, I think maybe even last year, I think some of the stuff the Cavs went through this year does them in. I don't know if they can navigate some. I think the personnel and stuff they have now with JB kind of as the helm it's impressive how much strife I think they've navigated, really.
I think a lot of other teams that put in their position would not come out on top as they did. Mm-hmm. And I think that says something about the group. And I think that Coach Bickerstaff even said that today, that, look, we've persevered through a lot of injuries, a lot of COVID stuff, and we haven't really been whole. And when you think about how good this team has been, how many games they've been able to win without them being whole, like, you kind of forget about them not being whole. At least I did. Like, this team has been so good, you kind of forget about how much they've lost. And I think that says a lot to just guys stepping up and buying into the system, buying into each other, buying into JP, buying in and being accountable is huge. You mentioned Kevin Love. It's not just Kevin. Like, what about Rondo? He's had 16 years and him saying that this is the most fun that he's ever had, or one of the most fun times that he's had in he said that this is one of the best coaches he's ever played for in his career. And he's played for a ton of guys. And him talking to Evan Mobley and having a relationship with the rookie and saying, like, look, this is really special what you guys have. Like, we have to take advantage of it now. It has to mean something. So I just think that this group is incredibly unique. And like you said, even if they're going to go through their bumps and bruises here before we get to the playoffs, we shouldn't overreact to that, because if they can stay together and continue to not want to disappoint each other and continue to learn from whatever mishaps might happen over the next, few weeks, like, these are all preparing you for the big stage. These are all preparing you for the big moments to come in the future.
No, I absolutely agree. And like to Chris's point, or your point, like you have Kevin Love here, you have Rajon Rondo here as like those two key veterans. You even have guys like Jared Allen, who is a young player, but he's a veteran in this locker room in a sense because he has so much experience under his belt. Like him and Karras were one of those two key figures who led the Nets to the playoffs before Durant and Kyrie and eventually James Harden to town and just kind of shake things up for them entirely. And it's really interesting to think about that as this Cavs team maybe starts to get healthy. Like it's official on the injury report at this point that Darius is out tomorrow against Detroit. So is Karras. Lowry's probable to come back. That once this Cavs team starts to get healthy, I think they can use these last 20 or so games to kind of find their groove again, like they had at the beginning of the season when even after they lose Sexton and eventually after they lose Rubio, they're still going out and beating teams in emphatic fashion because they have so many key pieces and key guys that are just clocked into their role and they know what they bring to the table and what they establish. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing. And I think that's another thing to be excited about if you're a Cavs fan too, is this Cavs team's going to get healthy again. And I think they're going to hopefully hit the switch at least at the right time where they're kind of heading into the playoffs as a team that nobody really wants to face in the first or second round versus, oh, the Cavs should just be happy to be here. And then they'll probably be like an easy first round exit because they'll draw like Brooklyn or Milwaukee or somebody who sneaks in through the play-in tournament.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm with you there. I think that at this point, there's no one that's going to play the Cavs in the playoffs thinking like, oh, we're just going to squeak by. And I mean, that just goes to show the respect that this team has drawn from the league. And I mean, it's gonna be a fun road.
Serena, let's end on this. Give me a name. Just give me the name that you are most looking forward to watching down the stretch here. Like it could be Darius, it could be Karras. Who is the name, or could be someone else entirely? Maybe you're like really watching Ed Davis for some reason. Who are you looking for to kind of make an impact and see what they do the last 20 games or so?
Oh man, I wish I could say my boy Ed. Ed and I go way back to the Lakers and Blazers days as well. But that in mind, quick Ed note, just because we haven't mentioned him yet, and I just thought about it. One of the things about Ed Davis, like you hear coaching staff talk about him and they go, man, he is the perfect vet that you want on your team because it's like all he does is be a good influence around the guys. He doesn't expect much. He's, doesn't expect the playing time, but when he has to fill in, he fills in. Like you hear coaching staffs talk about him and they just have nothing but positive things to say about like, this is the vet that you want on this team. But that's my Ed Davis sidebar. I am really curious, and I'm bummed that Karras isn't playing against Detroit. I hope he gets better soon because how he fits into this whole piece, because we haven't really gotten to see it yet. We've gotten to see little bits of it, but it takes time to be able to actually gel with the guys, for the other four guys on the court to know where Karras likes his spots, how the Cavs are going to, best utilize him. I'm most interested to see his development with this team, just because it's kind of the current unknown, and it could really level them up. So that's kind of what I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, I think that's the answer. I think that is the guy. He's only played 3 games with the team, one really good one back in Indiana. He's out now with a foot sprain. They acquired him maybe to be a part of the future. They acquired him to win basketball games right now. You didn't acquire Caris LeVert and trade a pick and trade another pick and trade Rubio. It's to win basketball games right now. And like I think everyone wants to see it. And it's going to be fascinating to see how he's deployed. If he starts, if he doesn't start, a whole lot of questions we're going to find out. Serena, you're going to be following it along up close and personal. People can find you on Bally. Just tell everyone where they can find you on social and whatnot if they're so inclined.
Yeah, if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Serena Winters, Instagram at Serena_Winters, and follow along, tweet at me. I'll try to respond if I can. Thanks for having me on. I loved my short time as part of the Locked On family.
Yeah. Evan, why don't you take us out?
As always, folks, you can find us anywhere you find your podcast, whether it is Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're on YouTube 5 days a week. Thank you again, Serena, for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. And yeah, no, give her a follow all of her work. She is a huge part of what they're doing over at Bally Sports, and yeah, no, it's definitely worth your time.